Welcome to the Daily Pour podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Lopez, and this is the place where we dive into all the big and small moments, from challenges to celebrations and every single thing in between. Each week, we will have heartfelt conversations, grow in faith, and pour out a daily dose of encouragement that's just for you, my friend. You are always welcome here, so get ready to laugh, learn, and leave inspired. We're pouring out the good stuff right here, right now. Let's go. Hi, it's your friend Rachel, and I am so glad that you are here. And I appreciate so much that you're tuning in once again to the Daily Pour podcast. Today is going to be extra special. I think you're going to be extra blessed because my good friend, Wendi Cross, decided to come and hang out with me earlier today. We sat on the couch and had just a great discussion. She shares her faith journey. Her and her family chose adoption ×2. And then we talk about this incredible ministry that is really making impact in the kids that are in foster care, in orphans across the world. And I just want to know more about it. And I'm sure that you do also. And so I can't wait for you to hear. But you know how sometimes when you're walking through a store, you see a particular item and it makes you think of someone that you love. Maybe it's a sibling or a friend or a parent or a spouse. And just this item alone, I think of my husband is such a fisherman that like anything that involves fish or lures, that kind of thing, I just think of him because he's such a fisherman. Or maybe a song comes on the radio and it makes you think of someone, or maybe you have a history with someone and you have a shared love of a certain song. There are a couple of verses in the Bible that make me think of my friend Wendi. And the first is from James chapter 1. It talks about true religion being one that looks after orphans. And I think of my friend Wendi, who has chosen adoption not once, but twice for her family. And then also her entire ministry, what she does is impacting orphans and impacting foster kids. And I just think that's my friend. True religion is looking after these special, incredible little humans. And then also at the end of chapter 2, also in James, it talks about faith without deeds or faith without works is dead. And in contrast to that, faith in action is alive. And so I think of my friend, like she's living out her faith. And that is my prayer for all of us as listeners, that we would put into action the things that God calls us out to do. And so sometimes, all the time, I feel like it's so important that we need to take our spiritual pulse and see what's going on, because we were created. If you are a follower of Jesus, you were created to love people well, to show up for people well, and to make impact in your city, in your neighborhood, in this world, in this generation. And so it's go time. It's time to be alive. It is time to get going and live out this thing that we call faith. And so without further ado, I can't wait for my friend Wendi to share her story with you. All right, you guys, we are jumping into another episode of the Daily Pour. And today I'm so excited because I have one of my favorite friends, Wendi Cross, on the Daily Pour podcast. What's up, Wendi?
I'm so excited to be here. And sister, I am so proud of you for making this happen. I truly am. You dreamed big about this, but you didn't just dream, you did it. And so I'm honored to be on here with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. And I just want our listeners, we're going to ask a couple fun questions and then we'll go into bigger details of your life and your ministry. But who is Wendi Cross?
Wendi Cross is a lover of Jesus and a lover of people. And of course, my favorite people are my husband and my 6 kids, my 4 daughter-in-laws, and my 3 grandbabies. The 4th is on the way. I genuinely love meeting new friends, and I love spending time with my friends. I'm also a missionary and an author. And I live my life really sold out for Jesus the best I can in humility, but also with boldness and courage.
Yep. I've seen that displayed in your life for sure. So what we're kicking off on the Daily Pour with every guest that's on the show is we want to ask them what are a few of their favorite things. And so we're not talking about people or places, but like your favorite things, your hobbies, your likes. What are a few things that you just love so much?
I love encouraging people. I love speaking. I enjoy reading. I like walking with friends. notice I don't like walking alone. I like walking with friends. I like shopping. And most of all, I like to travel.
I feel like there's a reason we're friends.
Yeah.
So many of the same things we love. I wanted to also ask you your personal journey to faith, how you came to know Christ, what that looked like for you.
I love sharing my testimony because I feel like for those of you who knew me prior to Jesus, you would believe in God just at the life transformation that's taken place in my life. So I was not a believer all the way through college, and I was a competitive cheerleader. I met my husband in college, and he played football at the University of Nevada, Reno, and we accidentally got pregnant when we were both on scholarship, and so we had to figure life out real quick. But we got married, and we had our baby, and by the grace of God, we finished school, and then we were already just not going to make it. Our marriage wasn't going to work. We continued to live the lifestyle of just partying and going out, but the difference was we couldn't do that together anymore because we had a baby. And so I would go out on a Friday night and he would watch the baby, and then he would go on a Saturday night and I would watch the baby. And so you can only imagine that was never going to last. And both my husband and I unfortunately came from broken families. Both of our parents were divorced. And I just remember getting to the place where I thought, this is crazy. This is never going to work. I'm going to move home. I don't want to do this. And I remember my husband saying, can we try church? And I was thinking, oh, great, you know. And so we ended up walking into a Christian church. There were some football players that he played ball with that had a huge influence in our lives. They loved us when we were real messy. And they had invited us a few times, and we went to a Christian church, and I'll never forget just the moment the worship music started and they started singing, and I was reading the words on the screen. I mean, I just sobbed my eyes out. Like, is his love really this endless? And can I really be forgiven as far as the East is from the West? Is this really true? Because I'm all in. And I remember I raised my hand to receive Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It single-handedly saved my marriage, my family. I remember looking at Rick, and he saw me just crying and crying and crying, and he thought, was this a good idea? And I said, it was a really good idea. And so I came to know the Lord that way. And I mean, when I do something, I'm all in. And so I was all in. I laid down a ton of obstacles that had been in the way. I laid down alcohol, I laid down drinking, I laid down certain friends. And I just remember being really lonely for a season. But God was always, always so near. And the more I was steadfast in seeking him and growing in relationship with him, the better my marriage got, the better my relationships got, the more I had peace and I wasn't so anxious. And so really, when we talk about becoming a new creation, it did happen for me. And I hope and pray that those that knew me before and those that know me now, the contrast is obvious, and that Jesus can indeed get all the glory for that change.
Yeah, he's in the business of changing lives. It's so incredible. And I've known you as a follower of Jesus. And so I've been so inspired by your faith and how you show up for people, how you show up for the Lord, just getting out there and doing so many things that many of us it's very outside of our comfort zone. So I'm so proud of you, the journey that you've been on. And I wanted to talk to you too. I know you talked about you and Rick getting married young, having this one little precious baby boy. And then now what? Tell us about your family.
Yes, we have a big, beautiful, colorful family that could have only been designed by a really good father. And so we have 4 biological kids. We have 3 boys and 1 baby girl. And then after our 4 bio kids, we adopted a 12-year-old boy from Ethiopia, and then we adopted a 6-week-old baby from Sacramento County. And so we have 6 kiddos. And like I said earlier, 4 of them, our oldest 4 boys, are all married. And so I have 4 new daughter-in-laws that it's, happened over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really fun journey to learn to love daughter-in-laws in a way that, is an encouragement to them, and letting my sons go. But yeah.
And you and Rick, how long have you guys been married?
We have been married for 27 years.
You guys,
Yes.
that's amazing.
Yes.
So with adoption, What did that look like for you guys? What was your story? How did you decide? What made you decide?
Definitely just wanting to be obedient to the Lord. My husband ended up going on a mission trip to Ethiopia and Uganda in 2009. And when he was there, the Lord really broke his heart. I mean, he had the same experience of just crying out to God on that trip as I had had about 14 years prior. So it was pretty incredible. But he came home and he had a picture book of some of the kids in the children's home in Ethiopia that were waiting for families. And we were committed to pray for these kids. And we got into the picture of Nebiu, who was an 11-year-old little boy at the time. And my husband shared his story with us and said, he's the oldest boy in the children's home. The children's home has filled up and emptied 2 times, and no one wants to adopt an older boy. And so we as a family prayed for him that night, and then I couldn't sleep. I started to recognize, wait a second, our oldest son is also 11. And if something happened to Rick and I, and nobody wanted to take our son because he was an older boy, then what? And I started to just pray and lay there. And then I felt like pretty clearly the Lord was like, hey, you're praying for something you could be the answer to. And so I woke my husband up and I was like, hey, I think that we are Nebiu's parents. Can we adopt him? And he sat right up in bed and said, if you're willing, start the paperwork tomorrow. And so we walked into this faith journey totally blind, totally reliant on God. We had no idea what an international adoption would entail, and had to really rest in God's provision every single step of the way. And so we adopted Neb, and it took us 1 year. We brought him home when he was 12.
So what did that look like? The process, was it so much more than you ever imagined it would be? Was it pretty easy? It took a year, but were there a lot of hoops to jump through?
There was a lot of hoops to jump through. International adoption is incredibly difficult. In fact, many countries have shut it down completely and have really started to work on reunification, which we do agree with. We will get into that later, but our ministry is founded completely on reunifying orphans into their biological families in country. And so 90% of children in Africa that are in orphanages or children's homes actually have living relatives that could care for them if we supported the family. And so Nebiu's situation, he was a true orphan, meaning nobody was able to care for him. And so that was a successful adoption for us, but it was difficult. And not only with the home studies and the things that we have to do adopting, in country, just the fundraising and the cost and the transition for him and being separated from his culture and all those things. It's really, really challenging, and it can be really beautiful. But from experience, in walking through this with several other families, the challenges are real and they're long. They're long standing.
Yeah. I feel like with biological babies, and if you have had a baby, you go through this labor and it's intense sometimes. And then it's the same with adoption. It's a different kind of labor. It's a labor of love. There's so many things that unless you're in it, you don't know, but just the different things that you have to do and the home studies and all of it. It's really big. So international adoption with Nebiu, and then you adopted again. And this time it looked a little different. It was through Sac County. Is that correct?
That is correct. And so we had Nebiu home for about a year. He wasn't even fully speaking English yet. And we got a call from an estranged cousin of mine that I hadn't seen since I was a little girl. And she basically said, can you guys come to the hospital and pray for my baby? And so we went and met our son, Jason, for the first time. Didn't know at the time, obviously, that he was going to be our son, but he was really, really sick. He was so addicted to methamphetamines at birth that if they were to take him off of the morphine drip, he would have died of a heart attack. And so he was really, really sick. He was 9 pounds, 13 ounces, but he was 6 weeks old, 6 weeks early, and had never had any type of prenatal care. So he was really, really sick. We brought my cousin home from the hospital for a couple weeks and helped her to rehab. We took her to visit the baby every morning and every night. And then unfortunately, once we got her into a rehabilitation facility, she did not stay. And so Jason became a foster baby. He became a ward of the court, and they asked us if we'd be willing to take him. And so that was we had to hear from the Lord. We had to, because Jason had a very big file of medical problems, and he was diagnosed with possible cerebral palsy. He was going to be coming home to us with a feeding tube. He may never walk or talk, and we had 5 kids already. And so we really needed the Lord to say yes, or it's not for us. And so we prayed as a family for that one. And we got to a place where we had peace in believing God for Jason's healing. Mm-hmm. We really genuinely believed the Lord would heal Jason once all of the drugs were out of his system. But we also knew that God's grace would be sufficient if he wasn't fully healed. And so once we had that peace with, okay, God's grace will be sufficient and we will be able to be incredible parents and an incredible family for him regardless of the healing, then we said yes. Mm-hmm. And so we brought him home at 6 weeks old.
Yeah, I feel like with adoption, and we've talked about this a lot because Brian and I have adopted too, also out of Sacramento County, but just when people are considering adoption, the advice that you would give them, I always say, unless you're called to it, don't even do this. Like, this has to be a calling. I think we need to take care of our kids and kids that are in foster care and like internationally, all of it. We need to care for the orphans and love on them, but that doesn't necessarily mean bringing them into your home. And so what would you say to someone that maybe is considering adoption? What would your advice to them be?
I would agree with you completely, to know that it's God's will for your family. The most important aspect of this is husband and wife are both 100% in agreement that we're in this no matter what, mm-hmm. because I haven't heard of or been a part of an adoption where it hasn't just gotten challenging at times. And of course, our bio kids are challenging too. Yeah. But adoption brings it brings another spiritual aspect that mm-hmm. not everyone is prepared for. And we can't do it without the Holy Spirit. We can't do it without the Lord. And so both husband and wife, I would say, have to be committed to this forever, like marriage. Like, this is a covenant, and we're stepping into something mm-hmm. that is so selfless for the good of something else. It reminds me of the gospel. Mm-hmm. But I do also believe if it's on your heart, to be obedient to it too, because we can't say no to these things that are scary, because God calls us to do these things. He calls us to adopt. I mean, he adopted us into his family. And so I do think just being on the same page with your spouse is priority. Yeah, I feel like that's essential in all of it. And I think even through childhood, I always was wanting to adopt. And Brian and I were really young dating. And I remember having conversations with him in high school. Not sure why he stuck around. But anyway, we would have these big conversations. And then for years being married, he was never like, yeah, I just don't feel like this is it. And then when it was like such a beautiful change of the story, and we stepped into that. And so I love that. Being on the same page, husband and wife, is the biggest deal. I know with adoption, with Jason, Sacramento County, all of it, that kind of led you into what you're currently doing now, which is XHope. Can you talk about what you're doing here in California and also across the globe in Africa? Yes. So XHope is our ministry. We started in 2011 and started our ministry. And it was really an outpouring of our stories of what we learned through our international adoption and then what we learned through our local adoption. And so when we first started XHope, which stands for Christ's Hope, it was to provide hope, love, education, and see children rehabilitated into forever families in the country of Uganda. That's where it started. So we were mirroring a lot of what we were taught in Ethiopia in the country of Uganda. And so we have a children's home there. We have a farm, we have a guest house, and we've built 2 schools, and we're in the middle of finishing up a sports complex for the community. And so we've seen thousands of lives changed through the ministry that we're doing there. And again, most of our children who come into our children's home as orphans or vulnerable are reunified into their families. And so we've had about 35 kiddos that have been placed back into their forever families after living with us in our children's home. And so it's just a beautiful story of redemption. And so we're so grateful to get to be a part of God's kingdom all the way across the world. And we also planted a church there on the facility of where our schools are. So a lot of our kiddos get to go to church on Sundays with their families. And then locally in Sacramento, we serve Sacramento County, and the city of Elk Grove, and then we're just launching into Amador, so that's exciting. But we meet the needs of foster and vulnerable youth by providing relief resources and then helping them build relationships in their communities so that they can break the cycle of poverty, or and we do that through caring for kids, kits and resources and items, scholarships, extracurricular activities, and then we gather these families 3 or 4 times a year for outreaches so that they also can connect.
I love that. And I love with like the humble beginnings and how God put this on your heart to start. And now you just entered into a new phase of the new building that you're in, but you started with, I love the story that the back of your trunk, you had all these things for kids. Can you talk about that and where you're at now?
Yes. And I think it's so important to remember this, because I think a lot of times we look at people who are leading ministries or they're doing these things from a platform and we think, wow, I want to be like that. But man, it does start with the small beginnings. When we first started serving local families, we had diaper bags full of baby supplies and backpacks full of school supplies in the backs of our trunks. And when kids would get placed in new homes, we'd drop stuff off to the families. And that's how it started. And it started with lemonade stands. And now we have this incredible opportunity to serve thousands of kids a year in our warehouse facility in Elk Grove. And then also, the village that we built in has been radically transformed. We have 39 Ugandan staff. That's 39 Ugandans who were qualified to work, but there was no work. Yeah. And they're running this organization without me there. I mean, we have raised up incredible leaders, and we're educating about 500 kids a year. Like, these are kids, again, that would not have had the opportunity to break the cycle of poverty. So it's beautiful. And it did start so very small. I remember our first fundraiser was a lemonade stand with our kids, and we bought 5 backpacks, and now we're giving out thousands. So
yeah. I love that when we step into obedience and follow after God, what he has for us, the things that he will do, and just sticking with it and following through, because it's not easy. None of it's easy, but it's all worth it, following after him. What has been, just in speaking of this ministry that's taking place in Elk Grove and now coming over to Amador and also in Uganda, what are some of the things that you just are like, oh, these are some of the biggest moments when you look back and reflect? It could be now, it could be years ago. What are a couple of the things that just have really ministered to you?
Definitely the reunification stories of kiddos who were in our children's home, and then we're able to reconnect them with like a grandfather or an aunt and uncle, and then they come to know Jesus, the whole family, because of this reunification journey. And we've got to pray over people. I remember one of the little boys that we reunified with his daddy. We were in the van, and we were driving, and I turned around and I just shared the gospel with the dad, and he just started sobbing, crying, and said, I want to give my life to Jesus. And we said the prayer of salvation right in the van. And I'm like, there's nothing better than people knowing and receiving the love of God because of our yes. Yep. Because I never want to be in the way of that. Every good gift is from God. It's not from me. It's not from us, right? But we can be actively saying yes to the Lord. And then I heard this said from actually our Ugandan pastor. He said, we may be the only Bible that people ever read. Yeah. And it's because like we have the opportunity when providing these gifts or these resources that God so graciously has given to us to then give out. But then they want to know why. Why? Because God loves you and sees you, and you're not forgotten. And so I think the salvation stories for sure. And then I just think the multiplication in Elk Grove when, like you said, we started so small and it was about resources. And now it's so much more about relationships. It's about seeing these kids get to go to college. We just gifted 6 scholarships this year to kids in Sacramento and Elk Grove, and watching those kids have the opportunity now to do something that they've only dreamed of. And we get to follow them, for the next 4 years.
And these are kids that have been in foster care or foster adopt situations.
Yep.
It's so amazing.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So we're getting to watch, we're getting to watch from the beginning of providing relief and resources to a full cycle of healing and success, and watching people be empowered to do something different than with their lives through a career or through school. And it's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's only God can do these things. It's so incredible. But thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for showing up for people. And for closing reflections, wanted just to have you share with our listeners something that you feel like would give them hope or just encouragement in their season, whatever they may be in. Any words of encouragement or hope that you would want to share?
Yeah, I think what I would love to encourage the listeners with is, faith starts with just a small yes. Mm-hmm. It starts with us being willing to move forward with something God puts on our hearts without thinking so far ahead that we're terrified to do it. Because we've seen it in our lives. The story of Jason is he did come to us. We prayed together with a small group every Wednesday night. And by the time that baby was 18 months old, he was fully healed, walking, talking, eating, no more feeding tube. And so we didn't know that's how the story would end for him. We hoped it would, but we were still willing to say yes and walk through daily. His grace is sufficient daily, right? And so I think in walking in faith, sometimes I think we believe we have to know the end of the story to say yes to God. And, my encouragement is just say yes daily. Say yes moment by moment and watch what the Lord will do.
Yeah. And Jason just graduated 8th grade. He's going into high school. He's probably one of the most darling boys you'll ever see. Like just so fun, so friendly. He's precious.
He is so precious. Yes. And he tells his own adoption story now. So those of you who are listening, you're like, you shouldn't tell that much. Oh, he tells that much and more. You should have him on the podcast.
He might be one of our next upcoming guests.
He would love it.
I love it. How can people connect with you, our listeners connect with you, or get involved even in supporting the mission of XHope? And also talk to me about your book. How can listeners get that?
Yeah, so we wrote a book last year. It's called Not Forgotten, and it's the story of our adoption with Nebiu from Ethiopia and just his journey as an orphan and then God's faithfulness every single step of the way. And so you can get that on Amazon, or also you can purchase that at wendicross.com. And then if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing at XHope, it's www.xhopemissions.org. You can join us on a mission trip to Uganda. We take teams 3 to 4 times a year. And if you'd like to request a speaker or have me come and share with your women's group or a small group or Bible study or mom's group, I'm here for you.
Yeah. You do a really great job. We've been so blessed to have you be a part of our ministry and at our church and all that you do. So thankful for you. You're such a sweet friend. I'm proud of you, excited for what's next, what God has for you. And I just thank you so much for being with us on the Daily Pour podcast. Any closing out things that you want to share?
Nope. Just excited that this platform is an opportunity for all of our listeners to be encouraged and inspired to say yes to God and to walk in faith.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Wendi.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you more. Thanks for joining us on the Daily Pour podcast. We will check in with you and hang out with you next week. See you then.